Star Trek Beyond is the story of the Enterprise on their 5-year mission in space. This is 3 years in now. They're all getting a little antsy, so they make a pit stop at a Federation base when all of a sudden Distress Beacon comes out of nowhere saying this other ship needs some help. So they go and help them, because that's what you do. And then one thing leads to another, giant explosions happen, and they're stuck on this alien planet with a new threat, a new villain, and they have to fight for their survival and for the survival of all of the Federation, while at the same time trying to remember why they're there in the first place. Star Trek Beyond is a really fascinating movie to me. It's actually a really good Star Trek movie, and I came out of it just very happy to have another good sci-fi movie under the belts. This was not made by J.J. Abrams. This was a whole different producer, new writers, but it's a really good exploration into why the Federation is a good idea. The movie has a really fantastic message, which is very poignant for the time, which is that diversity and multicultural unity is something that is stronger than individuals and an individual cause. Now, going into this movie, I had some concerns, mostly because since that last movie, some things have happened in the real world where actual people died. By that I mean Spock died, and so did Chekhov. Both actors, unfortunately, have passed away, but I didn't know how the movie was going to play with it. I didn't know if they were going to do a Fast and Furious, where they make it look like it's totally the way they meant to go, or how they were going to do that. What I can tell you is that they were able to do a proper send-off for Spock. Unfortunately, Chekhov, because it just happened so recently, like within the last month or so, they weren't able to fit that in there, but they did do a proper send-off, and it was very heartfelt and very warm. Now, what can I say about this movie? It's the third installment of a rebooted Star Trek movie with decades of history behind it, and a lot of hype going into this, and a lot of expectations going into it. What I can tell you is that the tropes are there. There's a lot of good, there's some negative, unfortunately, but ultimately I walked away from it saying, that's a Star Trek movie. I didn't know I needed that again. That's kind of my thoughts on all these Star Trek movies. Every time I walk into one of them, I don't realize I need another Star Trek movie. And then I walk out saying, I needed that in my life. So I came in, the tropes were there from day one. The red shirts did, everyone did. Is there lens flares? There's lens flares. Is there ridiculous camera shakes when they're fighting? Yes, there's ridiculous camera shakes when they're fighting. Ridiculous pseudoscience between all the officers to try to make sense with a simple analogy. Crazy aliens of all shapes and sizes with no explanations on them. Despite all those tropes, they do bring things to the table that were very Star Trek. They ask some very poignant questions. They bring in some really good points about responsibility, about how a culture should view certain things like war and violence and exploration and diplomacy. They explore what unity is and what singularity is, and they have a lot of very poignant messages for the time. Now, as the visuals go, I absolutely loved it. They did some really cool effects with warping, where you see them just cutting through space. Absolutely adored how they portrayed space, how they portrayed its majesty, its mystery, its overall gloominess, and how they made some of these utopian places, but at the same time they really pointed out, it's like, that is great, but it's not necessarily the best idea. Alright, moving on to characters, pretty straightforward. They said this in the trailer, but Kirk, he's having doubts about where he's supposed to be. He joined Starfleet on a dare. He was trying to live up to his dad. He didn't quite know himself. He didn't know what he wanted to be or where he wanted to go. That being said, his challenge in this was actually really entertaining. I really felt for him as a captain, and I really felt for him as a person. That being said, Spock, he's still going through the same stuff. Apparently Vulcan blowing up is like the most dramatic thing ever, because this guy is still going on it after the last 2 movies. It's almost becoming one note at this point, but at the same point I love Spock as a character. I'd love to see him have other challenges besides that. Bones, fantastic. I absolutely love Bones. He brought up so many points about space, just different ways of handling things, that I just chuckled every time. For example, when they see the new Federation space station, he looks at it and says, "That's stupid, and here's why." And I looked at him like, yep, he's right, that's a stupid design. Ultimately, he had the best quips in there, and he was really good as the emotional base for these things, and it was really fun seeing him and Spock paired up. Moving on from there, we have Scotty. Scotty is still awesome. Scotty actually does a callback to the previous movie with the missile situation. He's like, hey, that's fun that they did it, and he would have that idea. Moving on from there, we have Ahura. She doesn't really do stuff except say, "My captain will find me," and other things of that nature. Sulu actually got a little more development in this movie than the previous ones. I was very happy with that. They really followed in the tradition that George Takei was the original Sulu, and they gave Sulu in this universe and in this time a husband and a kid. And that was really fun. I was like, that's really cool you guys did that, and I highly appreciate it. There is one other character, I'm not going to tell her name, the white chick, and she has been stranded on a planet for years, trying to get back home and scared to death. She's basically Tarzaning this crap, where she has all this tech laying around from fallen ships, and she's been surviving on her own somehow. And ultimately, she was a really fantastic addition to the story. I would love to see her in more movies. As for the villain was quite interesting. I didn't recognize his species, but you find out later on why you don't recognize it. But the best way I can describe him is, imagine Ra's al Ghul in space. That's basically this character. I liked him. I liked how he did it. He's no Khan, but he's definitely better than the first guy. Almost to Benedict Cumberbatch levels of awesome, but he really killed it in this movie. I want to see more stories like this. And I also really want to know about the Star Trek Dark Ages. I want to know about the Klingon Wars in particular. That stuff sounds intense, and I so wish they would have shown some of it, but they really just allude to it, and I'm like, that sounds like the coolest stuff ever. Anyways, all in all, as a review, this was a fantastic addition to the Star Trek movies. I suggest watching it, but be aware. There's a lot of tropes and there's a lot of rehash of the previous movies. If you're going to hate on it, there's going to be some shaky cams you're going to hate on. There is going to be some rehashing, and ultimately they kind of don't get to the point or the whole philosophy of it until the last half, and I wish they would have hit that a little earlier on. But ultimately, I like the movie, and I look forward to future Star Trek movies. My name is Golden, and this is Midas Touch.